Columbia University has canceled its main spring graduation ceremony. The decision comes weeks after protests at the school with pro-Palestinian demonstrators calling for the university to divest from Israel. New York City police entered the campus in riot gear last Tuesday after protesters occupied Hamilton Hall. For an inside perspective of the protests and the university's response, New York Magazine partnered with student journalists from Columbia. We're joined now by the editor-in-chief of the Columbia Daily Spectator, Isabella Ramierez, and features editor for New York Magazine, Nick Summers, who collaborated on this project. Good to have you both.
Thank you.
First of all, both of us want to congratulate New York Magazine and you, Isabella, for this idea, this partnership, because it's brilliant to have the students who are the primary journalists on campus, the Columbia Spectator, reporting on what is happening at school. Isabella, there are so many journalists who, at some point in their career, start to understand the idea of objectivity. I think when we're young journalists, we're told that we're supposed to be objective, but very quickly we realize, as my mentor, Christian Amanpour, once told me, that there is no true objectivity. We all bring to our reporting our own biases, our own perspectives, but what there is objectivity in is in the methodology of our reporting. Is that something that you faced when you decided, or not when you decided, when this news broke and you were now in charge of reporters covering it?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a constant conversation we have in our newsroom about, separating our journalistic work from possible connection, right? We have the same guidelines that national newsrooms follow. We follow SPJ, a lot of code of ethics that we borrow. And so that has been an ongoing conversation. And really the way that we tackle that is the diversity of the people who are reporting on the issue. And we have a lot of reporters who have been following this storyline since, of course, October 7th, and who have followed it from multiple different angles. People who have also covered different sides or different sort of angles to the issue. So we really try to emphasize the multifacetedness of having a lot of people on the ground, a lot of people who are contributing to our projects.
And sort of just to remind the viewers that what Columbia did is basically lock down the university, and then you were not allowed on campus unless you had a reason to be there. You were a student, you were faculty. So other journalists didn't have the access that you had. So Nick, I'm curious, aside from access, which is obviously a key difference when you saw the student journalists, were there other things that sort of jumped out to you about their coverage that was different than what you saw in mainstream media?
For sure, and I want to point out that we began this collaboration before campus was locked down. We sort of had this hunch that the story was going to get huge. The Spectator students were already the best on that story, and so we partnered with them and then watched it become the biggest story in the city and then the biggest story in the country. But I think the depth of trust that the Columbia community has for the reporters at the Spectator and the photographers, we should mention them as well, among students, among faculty, they've been aggressive and balanced throughout this entire story. And so when we were at the magazine thinking, well, how can we give this story the sort of the size of attention that it deserves? Partnering with them was an early idea and one we felt very excited about doing.
So Isabella, it's sort of sorry, you didn't actually answer my question, part B, but I'm curious about the differences in coverage. I mean, I'm curious, did we miss things because we didn't have access? Yeah.
Absolutely. I think, it's really hard when you're not there all the time. I live there, sleep, eat, and we all do. And I think we have a stake in our community. We know our peers. Many of the people involved on all angles are friends of ours, classmates, people we know really well. And I think that's really crucial to sort of the community that we build in our reporting and the connections that we have with our sources. And I also think that partially it's an issue of, we don't just cover the biggest thing that comes out of the situation. We covered every single aspect of the situation, from the smallest minute details to the dance performance that happened at the encampment to the occupation of a building, right? Every single part of it, we're there, we're covering it, our photographers are there, and I think that's really crucial to building a huge storyline of trust and of community building.
Yeah. Isabella, I want to ask you about something because you said something that's so important and I want people to really understand it. And it's a lesson that national newsrooms can learn. I'm talking about us here at CBS, perhaps even at New York, everywhere in the country where there are newsrooms. You pointed out about the diversity that you have at the Columbia Spectator, which is so important on how to cover stories that take on national importance. So that's key. But the other thing is there's a narrative propagated by mostly politicians that somehow the people who are protesting what's happening in Gaza are privileged. That these are rich kids that are just they want their soy milk and they want food delivered while they're protesting. The protest.
I mean, SNL this weekend was almost kind of jumping on that.
Was kind of jumping on that, right? Can you just describe for the audience that we were just seeing some of the photos of the people that contributed to this project. Many of them are first-generation Americans. Many of them are working and paying student loans off. Many of their parents are struggling to pay. Yes, it's a privilege to attend Columbia University. It's a privilege to attend any university, especially an elite one. But just give us an understanding of the breakdown of the young people who were taking part in these protests.
Yeah, I think that was a broad sweep generalization. As you said, an elite university in New York City, I think that's just the general understanding. But a lot of the food came from donations. A lot of community organizations that came and said they wanted to support this donated most of the food and most of the resources that they had at the encampment. There were also a lot of students who, and we've spoken to these students, who said that the risk that was on the line for them when it came to arrest, suspension, and now expulsion being on the line is very severe and very significant. And it was sort of, despite that, I am participating because, and there's sort of their belief, it's like, if the people in Gaza are experiencing this, I can kind of go through this discomfort or this even challenge. And that was a big motivating factor for a lot of those protesters and sort of what brought them in, as well as I think there is, that is an idea that was not exactly, I think we were able to represent much better in our reporting and really even focus on specifically the narratives of low-income first-generation students who spoke to us also for the New York Magazine collaboration about their unique experiences and participating in this and all the things they were thinking through when making the decision to partake.
As you know, the mayor of New York City said that there were outside agitators that were on campus. In fact, a lot of people who had been arrested were actually not students at Columbia. But I'm curious about what you saw on campus. What was motivating people? Were there outside agitators?
Right. I think we're aware that there were non-affiliates potentially in the building, as well as the internal and external arrests that occurred on Tuesday. But our understanding is that the majority were students, the majority were alumni, faculty, people who have connection to Columbia. And I think also, it's an interesting narrative as well, because the purpose of the crackdown was to maintain, right, these internal, to keep only affiliates on the ground. And that's really what we have seen primarily being the drivers of this. Same thing with the encampment, same thing with the occupation.
Before we go, we have about 30 seconds, but I have to ask you because this has become a narrative as well, and Nick, you can weigh in as well. Jewish students say that many instances they felt threatened. There's a narrative also from some of the people that you interviewed that say, look, being threatened is different than being uncomfortable. There were perhaps some uncomfortable moments. What did you both learn through the reporting? Were there people there who were physically threatening Jewish students? Were there people there who made anti-Semitic remarks? And I know we're going to push to the article so people can read for themselves. But what did your reporters come back with?
I think you have to really read for yourself, but I think the biggest thing is there are voices that will tell you all different types of things, and many of them are Jewish. Jewish people who participated, Jewish people who felt threatened, and who did experience anti-Semitism, and then Jewish people who can, acknowledge that some of the discomfort that came from the encampment wasn't necessarily from their personal experiences of anti-Semitism. So it's a really wide range, and I really push people to understand it not binary, right? Not in a binary of it made people uncomfortable or threatened, and people were fully on it. I think it was so much more complicated than that, and really that's what we were trying to bring in with our collaboration with the sources that we spoke to, is all of those perspectives and people kind of really thinking through it, and that's why the narrative of the story itself is really focused on the voices of the people. Let them speak and tell the story.
It's a sprawling oral history in the magazine. It includes anecdotes of what you're referring to across the spectrum. I mean, there's a lot of students testifying about Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, and again, I just want to congratulate the reporters at The Spectator for delivering such a breadth and a depth of reporting.
And congratulations to New York Magazine for recognizing
absolutely that. Brilliant, Nick and Isabel. I think that, this is a conversation that is nuanced, that is emotional, and often with headlines or, 1 minute long stories, you really don't get the complexity of this conversation.
And you've gone beyond that.
Yeah, I'm so sort of happy that you were able to do this. Thank you so much.
Thank you both very much.